Okay, so all right, so let's start off with some of the basics. If we go to the location manager, most of you already know how to merge and how to kind of filter through your locations. So these filters at the top here let you kind of quickly scroll through the different types of locations that you have in your system. Right now we're using my webinar database, so the locations are a little bit trashy and they just kind of look a little wonky. But yeah, so in order to merge a location, say you either created a duplicate location, named it something a little bit differently, or you have an old location that you don't use anymore, there's no inventory in it, and you just kind of want to get rid of it, then instead of deleting it, we don't really like to delete things in our system. We like to merge them. And it's as simple as right-clicking on the one that you need to get rid of. In this case, we're going to get rid of Nick's backup yard, and we're going to right-click on it and click merge. And we've actually changed the menu here. It used to have you type it in and all that stuff, but now all you have to do is select it from a list of all your locations. So since it's a backup of the Nick's yard, I'm going to put it back into the original one. It's going to ask to verify with a little bit of math, nothing too heavy. And there we go. Now we see we've merged those two locations and gotten rid of them. All right. So now something that not a lot of our users use is the clone command for locations. This is especially useful if you, yeah, it's great if you just want to create a location on the fly and kind of copy some of the properties over from one of your yards. It also serves as a great backup tool for you. If, for example, you want to move around your racks and kind of change out the layout, but you don't want to risk messing up your actual yard, you can clone it to a backup like we saw with Nick's and mess around with that yard and then kind of merge them back together. One important thing to note is that none of the inventory will be cloned. So you're not going to duplicate inventory by using the clone function on your location. All right. So to clone, it's much the same as with the merge. All you got to do is right-click. I'm going to use my webinar yard, and I'm going to right-click and clone it. Excuse me. And here we have my new backup location. As you can see, it assumes that it's not necessarily a direct copy of your location, so it's not going to have the AFE or any of the contact information. Excuse me. So you will need to go in there and populate that yourself. You can do that simply by double-clicking on it, and here we can enter in the AFE, the parent, and all the shipping information that we so choose. Now I want to look at these two side by side. That is the original and the clone. The clone is this one on the right, and the original is here on the left. If we go to the child location for the original, we can see that these are the racks that I have my inventory on, and I have some behavior set up for these racks according to the status of the inventory that gets moved on them. So I've got them positioned where I want them. I have the behavior set up where I want them, and I have actual inventory on them. Now when I cloned it cloned over those racks for me, right? If I click on the child locations on the clone, we can see that they're all there, including the behaviors for the EMI, and anything that have behavior is going to be cloned automatically. So that's what I mean by a backup yard. It has, if you have a yard with like 150 racks on them, you're not going to have to redo that if you need to replicate it for whatever reason. Now, what I meant by the inventory duplication, that it's not going to do that for you. It's I'll show you in the yard view. So if we go to yard view, and we look at this is my original yard, my webinar yard one. We can see that I have several racks with inventory on them. And I actually forgot to refresh. So let's go back to yard view. Right, so here's all my inventory in webinar yard one. And if we go to the backup I just created, that clone I made, we can see that none of it's there. So the racks were created in this new yard. The behaviors are set. The locations are saved. But none of the inventory gets just cloned out of nowhere. So you don't have to worry about that. Now, this, as I said before, this is a great way to quickly make a new yard if you're going to name this something else and use it for a completely different purpose. But it can also be used to, like I said, to back up your yard. So, for example, if I wanted to arrange these racks in a different way, I could come into the arrange view for my backup, mess around with it, maybe even change some of the behaviors on these racks. And it's not going to affect my original yard. So if I save the rack position and close that out, you see that my original is unaffected. So basically it lets you go ahead and make the changes to your yard, make mistakes without you having to worry about messing up your inventory or messing up your actual yard. So that's a quick way to make those changes. Now, let's look at the, should have saved my rack positioning there. So let's say you do go ahead and make those changes to your rack positionings, reorganize your yard however you see fit, and then say, hey, okay, I don't want to use my original yard now. I want to use this new one that I just set up. As we covered before, we can use the merge functionality. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some renaming. Much like with the clone and the merge, you can just right-click on a location and click the rename. And it's going to warn you. It's going to say, hey, this is not reversible. And I'm going to name this webinar yard gold. And it's going to think for a sec. So the reason I'm renaming this is so I can name my new location, that backup I created. I can name that the yard name. I can name that webinar yard 1 now. I'm going to do the same thing for this one, but this time I'm going to name it webinar yard 1. And now all I need to do to get my inventory into my my new yard that's arranged a little bit differently, I'm just going to merge it. And it's going to ask me to verify with some math. And it's going to think for a sec because there's a lot of jobs on that. All right, so now my old yard is gone. My new yard is now named properly. I can come in here, refresh, go to yard view, and there you go. My inventory is now in the same rack that it used to be in my original yard. But now the layout is obviously a little bit differently. And there's a behavior on that EMI rack that I arbitrarily set to change the color of inventory to red, I believe. Yeah, there you go. So a cool way to back up your yards. And I mean, if you change your yards constantly, it wouldn't be a bad idea to back up every now and then. As you can see, anytime you clone it, it automatically names it backup and has a date attached to it. So any questions on the cloning, merging, or renaming? As I said, inventory is not going to be affected by either cloning or by cloning. However, it will be affected by renaming. So if you rename your yard, let's say we were to rename this to webinar yard 2, it will affect the any inventory on that location. And I can demonstrate this for you guys. So let's rename this to webinar yard 2 to show you the behavior of a rename. Okay, I'm going to rename that to webinar 2. And I got to refresh everything. And if we go to yard view, you can see the jobs themselves have had their yard location outdated. So I guess it prevents you from having to worry about about keeping track of your inventory that way. So I guess the takeaway here is that the clone won't duplicate, but renaming and merging will affect the jobs there. Any question on that behavior? And I mean, obviously it affects the Pipe Explorer as well. So if we go in here, we can go to webinar yard 2 and search, and it'll pop up all that inventory that was previously on my original webinar yard 1. One thing to note, I don't know if any of you noticed, but webinar yard 1 is still listed at the top of my list here. And if I do a search, it's not going to return anything. The reason for that is that we need to go in and change our settings. Since webinar yard 1 was our default location, the system's not going to blank this out for you, right? It's going to keep whatever you set it to. So when we change the name of our default yard, we rename it, we clone it, whatever, we need to double check that our settings are correct so that we're not seeing this kind of ghost location. So I'm going to set it to webinar yard 2, hit OK. And in the location, we shouldn't see webinar yard 1 anymore. So it was just kind of a little ghost entry because the setting will save whatever you input into it. It doesn't have any logic as to, it doesn't think for you, right? All right. So I'm going to close everything out right quick. Refresh and go back into locations. All right, so those are the 3 basic management tools that we wanted to show. Now I want to demonstrate some of the properties that a yard can have. So I'm going to go back. We're going to stick with the webinar yard 2 since that's the one we've been working with. First off, I wanted to show you the map tab, and this is basically Google Maps. I'm not going to put any particular address there, but as you can see, you can save the Google Maps direction of your yard location here, and it's kind of like a built-in Google browser, and we can save that. And if we come back to it, it's there. So that's nifty little functionality. It'll follow whatever position you save it at. So if anybody wants to kind of get quick directions to your yard, they can and have a login to your system. They can use this tab. It's pretty helpful and just kind of cool overall. You can also attach images to your locations, whether that be a logo or an actual bird's eye view of it, or a diagram of the yard and of the different racks in your yard and the type of inventory that corresponds to those racks. So I'm going to go ahead and upload an image, and I think it's JPEG. Yeah, we're going to use this guy. And there we go. We've now saved an image to our yard, so anybody who comes in here can look at this image, and you can actually have multiple images. Right now, it doesn't have any other than one. As well as images, you can also attach documentation to it. Whether this be legal paperwork, directions, what have you. I've just created a little dummy text file here called location document. And we can attach this. Now this works pretty much the same way that attachments do on the jobs themselves. And you can see who it was uploaded by and what the document name is. And right-clicking on it lets you either delete it or open it. In this case, I'm just going to open it directly here. And they don't have to have this file saved to their computer. It's just a real easy way to share small files like images and text files, PDFs, that kind of thing, using your OCOS database. All right, now I want to cover the parent-child location behavior. A cool way to use this is to do things by region. So I'm going to close out of this. And if we see at the top here, we have a section called regions, a type of location called regions. If you click on that right now, I don't have any. But let's go ahead and create a new one. So I'm going to create the north region. Make sure you need to select the type that affects the kind of behavior. And I'm going to set Beast Test Company, which happens to be my company, in this testing database. And I'm going to put, you can put, United. You can put just kind of country and state if you want, or just country, locations, information. So we're going to leave this pretty blank. Not going to have much on it. Now what I want to do is show you here now. So we have the north region. You can assign your different yards, wells, and really any location you want to this region using that parent-child relationship. So I'm going to go ahead and assign webinar yard 2 to that region. The way I do that is I open it up, and under the parent slider, where is north? Oh, I need to refresh, sorry. anytime you create a new location, you got to go back to the home screen and refresh. It has to do with the caching. So webinar yard 2, and where's parent? North. There we go. So I'm going to save that. So I'm going to keep this open over here and go to North so I can show you kind of how that looks. Where's the other one? There we go. Okay, so if we go to the child locations, we can see that it's already been automatically added to this region location, much in the same way that I could just type in a location here. So the parent set North here, sets it into the child locations here for North. Now we already have racks and inventory set up on the yard, webinar yard 2. So now that we've assigned it, we of course need to save everything. I'm going to show you what that kind of looks like in yard view. All right. So this is my webinar yard 2. Now I'm going to go to North and refresh. And you can see that there's a rack icon for webinar yard 2. Though we know this isn't a rack, this is an actual yard. Now if you click on this, it will take you to that yard view. Not necessarily super useful for when you have one yard on your region, but if you were to, for example, assign Nick's yard as well to this region, and what else? Let's do training yard. Go ahead and assign that to North, and make sure we have some racks in here. And refresh. We can kind of manage multiple yards from this yard view of the region. So now we have our 3. We're going to save the rack positions. Go to North. Refresh. So now you have 3 yards, and you can kind of see them all on the same page. And as I mentioned before, clicking on them will take you to that yard. And as you can see, it opens up a new tab for you. So you can theoretically have all 3 or all 4 of those open at the same time. Now what I would probably do in this situation is set my default location to that North region. Nope, let's think it. Here we go. So I'm going to set this to North. Oh. We might need to work on that one a little bit, but you get the point here. Yard view. So the individual yards retain their information, their inventory, and the jobs within them retain their information for the yard. But it just kind of helps you narrow down and manage your yards a little bit differently. This is especially useful if you have a large amount of yards. So any questions on the regional thing? Okay, I don't see any questions, so I'm just going to keep on rolling. Again, if you guys have questions, please type them into the chat section, as everybody is muted for the duration of this webinar. All right, so let's look at some of the other properties here. As most of you know, when you're setting up a location, you can assign it an 8. Now, where does that populate? So I'm going to assign an AFE that's just 99999, just so we can find it easily. Now that's important when you're doing billing and things like that. So whenever you go to create a sales order, and I know I'm using my yard for a sales order, but that's we're just demonstrating here. So I'm going to do Beast Test Company, and if I were to populate this in the ship to, for example, here, if I had any, I don't have any street information. This is where the AFE is going to populate for this location, for this sales order. Let's go in here and actually assign it some properties. And city. right, let's save that. I'll be the contact. My phone number is 555-555-5. Lots of fives. And the email address. Now, let's do support. It's, oh, the tax rate. So the tax rate is much like the AFE. It's going to be pulled onto the sales order from the location, not from any of the jobs or anything like that. So now we set that. We can go into the Order Explorer, create a new sales order. And I may actually need to refresh, but we'll give it a shot. And we're going to say ship to WebInGuard2. There we go. So our AFE has been populated. Our tax rate has been populated on our sales order from the information we input into the location. And as I said before, this is a little bit weird because I have my ship to as my own yard. But that's where that information is going to populate on your orders. And the same goes for purchase orders and anything like that. So if you know the tax rate for your vendors and the manufacturers that you purchase from, then you can go ahead and populate that in the AFE and have the system do the work for you. Now, an important thing to note, many locations will have either multiple AFEs or AFEs that change through time depending on the situation. Something you need to keep in mind is that the system is not going to override any of the information for you. So if I were to go ahead and say, change this to 11111, my AFE, for example, and go back to order 28, it's not going to change your AFE. It's going to assume that you entered that AFE and that AFE was correct at the time you created that purchase order. So you don't have to worry about messing up your history or having to go back and verify that your sales orders are still in order. It's only going to affect things to come. So if we were to, for example, create another sales order and use that same location, it will reflect the new AFE. Yeah. So you don't have to worry about overwriting things or anything like that. And unlike the trucks, which will reflect changes until they're closed, the sales orders are kind of static in the way they work. They'll retain the information as it's inputted, regardless of whether they're active, closed, whatever the status is. Any question on the behavior of the tax rate from the locations or the AFEs? I guess I could change the tax rate on this guy. It's a really low tax rate, 5, at least for us. So we refresh this, it's not going to change the tax rate. It's going to leave it however you entered it in. All right. Now, something most of you guys are aware of are the report filters for location. That is also another, I guess, useful thing to understand about the behavior of locations is that you can run reports by location. So you don't have to see everything that you have in every yard. So if we wanted to do, for example, a rack audit, we could just build the filter and set a location down here. And then we return results for webinar yard 2. Let's select report. Let's do summary 1, build filter, and report. There we go. So pretty intuitive on that one, but especially when it comes to regions and things like that, it's a useful tool to run your reports with. Yeah. Oh, and to note with the regional report thing, you probably won't be using the region filter as the location since those locations don't technically have inventory in them. You'll have to run them by their child location. So. And that is pretty much about it. That's all I have for you guys. If there are any questions that I can answer, please feel free to type them in. I can also unmute anybody if you'd like to, if you'd rather just ask me directly instead of typing it. To recap, we covered the location management tools by right-clicking, clone, rename, merge. We covered the different tabs, some of the different tabs. We have map, attachments, images. We have we cloned a location to create a backup. We merged two locations to kind of issue changes to our yard layout. And we covered where the AFE tax rate populates and how they kind of behave. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. That's all I got for you guys. I'll stay on a little bit longer to answer any questions you might. Thank you all.